Americans don't drive a lot by choice. They're forced to. In the United States, cities weren't built close together. They were built far apart. Homes, offices, schools, and stores are often miles away from each other. In states like Texas, a simple grocery trip can mean a 15 to 20-minute drive. America also has one of the largest highway systems in the world, so driving becomes the fastest option. Public transport works well in places like New York City, but outside major cities, buses and trains are limited, or don't exist. That's why most Americans own a car, and the average driver travels over 13,000 miles every year. So in America, driving isn't a habit. It's how the country was designed. Do you think this is good design or bad? Cross this line in America, and the rules change. In the United States, there isn't just one law system. Each state has its own government and its own constitution. That means when you cross a state border, rules can change. Speed limits, taxes, alcohol laws, even how schools are run. For example, some states allow alcohol sales almost everywhere, while others restrict when and where you can buy it. In Texas, laws often focus on personal freedom, while in California, rules lean more toward regulation and safety. This system exists because America was built as a union of states, not one centralized country. It allows states to experiment, follow local culture, and govern people differently. So in the US, you're not just changing states, you're entering a new rulebook. Should states really have this much power? America doesn't live in one time. It lives in 4 different ones. In the United States, the sun doesn't rise everywhere at the same time. That's because America is huge, stretching nearly 3,000 miles from east to west. When it's morning in New York City, people in California are still asleep. That's why the US uses 4 main time zones: Eastern, Central, Mountain, and Pacific. But it gets even crazier. Alaska and Hawaii have their own separate time zones. This system keeps school schedules, businesses, flights, and even live TV working smoothly across the country. So in America, the day doesn't start once, it rolls across the map. Would you prefer one time zone or many? The United States once tried to buy Greenland, and no, it wasn't a joke. Most people think Greenland is just ice and snow, but on the map, Greenland sits right between United States, Europe, and the Arctic Ocean. That location makes it strategic gold. As Arctic ice melts, new shipping routes are opening, cutting travel time between America, Europe, and Asia. Greenland is also rich in rare earth minerals, which are critical for phones, EVs, and military technology. And deep inside Greenland, the US already operates one of its most important military bases, watching the Arctic skies. That's why in 1946, and again decades later, the US seriously discussed buying Greenland. Not for land, but for power, security, and the future. So Greenland isn't just a frozen island, it's a global chess piece. If you were the US, would you want Greenland too? For a brief period in history, the United States considered a project that could have quietly shifted one of its most important borders. Look at the map of the southern United States in the early 20th century. The Rio Grande River formed the boundary between nations, but like many rivers, it didn't stay perfectly still. Floods pushed it off course, new channels formed, old paths dried up. Every shift created confusion about where the border actually lay. To stabilize the situation, engineers proposed controlling the river, straightening sections, reinforcing banks, and fixing its position in place. But forcing a river into a fixed path comes with risks. If the water found a way around the controls, it could abandon the engineered channel and carve a new route entirely, leaving bridges, towns, and even border crossings stranded in the wrong place. After years of work, a compromise was reached. Manage the river carefully, but allow it enough freedom to avoid catastrophic change. This dam is holding back a disaster. In the western United States, there's a massive structure that controls one of the most important rivers in the country, the Hoover Dam. It holds back the Colorado River, creating a huge reservoir called Lake Mead. This water supports millions of people across multiple states. Cities like Las Vegas, Phoenix, and even parts of Los Angeles depend on this system. But over time, water levels in the reservoir have been dropping. Less water coming in, more demand going out. As levels fall, the pressure on the entire system increases. Hydropower becomes harder to generate, water supply becomes less stable, and the margin for error gets smaller. Because this isn't just a dam, it's a control point for water, electricity, and the daily life of millions. For a brief moment in history, the United States nearly created a problem it wouldn't be able to undo. Look at the map of the US in the 1800s. The country was expanding fast, but moving people and goods across it was painfully slow. So engineers had a bold idea. They wanted to redirect an entire river to make trade easier. The plan was simple: cut a new channel, force the water to follow it, and connect regions faster than ever before. But rivers don't behave like roads. As digging continued, the water began pulling harder toward the new path. Engineers realized something terrifying. If the river river fully switched, entire cities would lose access to water, trade routes would collapse, and borders between states could shift overnight. One uncontrolled flow could have redrawn the map. Work stopped immediately. Instead of forcing the river to obey, the U.S. changed strategy, building locks, channels, and controls that worked with the river, not against it. For a brief moment in history, the United States nearly created a disaster it couldn't reverse. Look at the map of the Great Lakes. These lakes hold about 1/5 of the world's fresh surface water. As cities grew in the 1800s, shipping routes became critical. So engineers proposed something radical: divert water to improve navigation and connect inland trade to the Atlantic faster. Channels were widened, water flow was altered, control structures were built. At first it seemed like progress, but then scientists noticed something alarming. Water levels began dropping in ways no one had predicted. If the changes continued, shorelines would retreat, ports could become unusable, and ecosystems would collapse. Entire regions depended on those lakes for transport, industry, and drinking water. The plan was scaled back. New agreements were made to protect water levels and prevent permanent damage. Because once a system that large changes, there's no quick way to restore it. If a war ever starts, this is the fastest route to attack the United States. Not from Europe, not across the Atlantic. From here, zoom into Russia, now draw a line over the Arctic, straight to Alaska. This is the shortest path on Earth. It's called the polar route. But here's what makes this route so dangerous. Most people think distance is the problem. It's not. It's how little time this path gives. Missiles don't travel like planes. They follow the curve of the Earth, which means this route cuts directly across the top of the planet, and that changes everything. Because the moment something launches, early warning systems don't have hours. They have minutes. In some cases, less than that. That's why radar systems are placed right here, focused on this exact path. There's an invisible line on Earth that most animals never cross. And the strange part, it's not a wall, it's not a border, it's just there. This line runs through Southeast Asia between islands like Bali and Lombok, stretching up toward the Philippines. Now here's where it gets interesting. On one side, you find animals you'd expect in Asia: elephants, tigers, rhinos, even certain types of birds. But cross over to the other side, and everything changes. Kangaroos, Komodo dragons, animals more similar to Australia than Asia. And the distance between these islands, just a few kilometers. So why don't animals just cross? The answer goes back millions of years. This region sits on the edge of different tectonic plates, and between these islands, there's a deep stretch of ocean that never fully closed. Scientists call this boundary the Wallace Line.